Welcome to Capitol Hill. Well, the government's introduced its amendments to change the Migration Act and is appealing to the national interest and to MPs who have their votes on the bill recorded for posterity. But the opposition says the Malaysia solution that the government wants is bad policy and it won't support it. To discuss these events and many more besides, I've been joined by Labor MP Julie Collins and Liberal MP Ken Wyatt. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Lyndall.
Julie, it's clear that the opposition is not going to support your amendments to the Migration Act. Is it worth pursuing them, just to make the point?
I think we need to be really clear about what's going on here. What we're asking every Member of Parliament to do is to look at the national interest, to look at this legislation. It's enabling legislation that really puts us back to the position that we were in prior to the High Court decision, and that is where the government of the day can make appropriate arrangements and decisions in relation to offshore processing. That is what we're asking for. We're not asking for the opposition or for anybody else to make a decision between Nauru, if that's what they really believe, or Malaysia. We're asking for enabling legislation to be passed by the Parliament.
Ken, are you at all worried that if you vote as the opposition will, that your vote will be recorded as a no on this piece of legislation?
No, not at all, because I think that our stance is still correct. Sending people away to a country that is not under the UN arrangements for human rights, then I think that is a major issue. I personally express concerns about transferring women alone and children alone to Malaysia, because when you are alone, then you don't have the types of supports around you. Look, the Nauru solution worked before, it will work again.
But have conditions changed? Given it's been quite a while since Nauru was used, have conditions changed in the intervening period?
Look, the High Court decision that's been talked about within the chamber clearly shows that Nauru is not off the agenda. It just takes some further investment, and we've already got facilities there, and Nauru would welcome people back onto their island.
Julie, are you worried at all as a backbench MP that if more boats start arriving, if the legislation does not get through Parliament, that in the end the government will get the blame for that?
I think what we need to be clear about is that what we're asking people to do is to have enabling legislation, as I said before, to pass enabling legislation. Ken's talking about the UNHCR and he has concerns about some of the arrangements that we're making. They sent people to Nauru, which was not signed up to the UNHCR at that time. Tony Abbott is talking about turning boats back around to Indonesia, which is not a signatory to the UNHCR. There are serious concerns about Nauru in terms of whether it worked. We differ on that point. Certainly it's very expensive. We've given the opposition every bit of legal advice that we have on the High Court decision. We've given them advice in relation to, our best advice is that the Malaysian arrangement is the best deterrent. That is the advice we've provided them with. This is from the immigration officials that provided advice to the last government.
Julie, one of the challenges in this, though, is sending people to a country that is not a signatory, in which the whole context of where we're placing people leaves them at risk. I have serious concerns about guaranteeing the safety of any individual or any citizen in the sovereign right of another nation, and that's one of the challenges we have, because it becomes problematic. And look, Labor has always been strong in terms of social justice and fighting for the rights of individuals, and I just find it interesting that they seem to have walked away from that.
We certainly haven't walked away from that, Ken, and there are many people in the Labor Party. Every member of the Labor Party is compassionate and concerned about these people as individuals. We know that they are real people, that they are individuals who have real issues. What we actually want to do is take people from Malaysia who have been in camps for decades and give them opportunity in this country. What you are saying is that that's not okay. That you're saying that the Malaysian, you have obviously concerns. You have no indications that the Malaysian government won't do as it's saying it will do in the agreement, and that is provide processing in Malaysia, provide people with opportunities in terms of employment and education, and they have said that they will do that. You have no indication that they won't do that. You have no evidence that they won't do that. And what you are doing with your policy is saying that you're happy to turn boats back to Indonesia, who is not a signatory to the UNHCR. You will have on your conscience, you could have on your conscience, if this legislation does not go through, more leaky boats coming to Australia and issues like we have with Christmas Island.
A brief response, Ken?
I'm just going to say very quickly, no, our solution is still focused on Nauru. We're still focused on the needs and the way in which we can provide the range of services for health, education, and certainly the processing within Australia's responsibility, and that does not detract. And yes, the issue of turning boats back has happened in the past, but equally, Prime Minister Gillard, when she was in another role, certainly indicated that was also a solution at that time. Why the sudden change?
If I could turn now to the economy, Julie, Wayne Swan has got Euromoney's Finance Minister Treasurer of the Year award. If the economy is doing so well that he gets an award for his management of it, why don't you seem to be getting credit from the public?
Certainly, I know in my own electorate, Lyndall, people are very pleased with the way the Labor government's performed on the economy. When I get out and about in my role as Parliamentary Secretary for Community Services across the country, people recognise that our government made the right decisions during the global financial crisis, that we actually moved very quickly to try and protect Australian jobs, to protect Australians from the worst impact of the global recession. We managed to do that.
But it used to be that the economy was everything. Someone famously said it's the economy's stupid. If the economy's so much a part of what governments do, it doesn't seem that you're getting the credit for what you say is the government's good stewardship of it.
Well, I don't agree that we're not getting credit, I guess is what I'm saying, Lyndall. I think that we are getting some credit out there. I think people recognise that Labor did a good job during the global financial crisis. Certainly in my own electorate, and I move across the country, that is what we're hearing. We've created 750,000 new jobs since we came to government 4 years ago. That is a record for any government for a 4-year period. We have worked very hard to make sure that unemployment is low. We've tried to remove barriers to productivity. We are working extremely hard on the fundamentals of the economy. The economy is still very important, and it obviously is part of what Labor has been working on for the last 4 years in terms of the productivity agenda, in terms of the national broadband rollout and increasing opportunities for Australia. The clean energy bills are a further part of that in terms of green jobs for Australians, in terms of being ahead of the game in terms of other countries.
Ken, whatever you think of the government's management of the economy and individual spending decisions, the fact that Australia is doing so well compared to other developed nations, doesn't the Treasurer deserve some credit for it?
Look, let me say that there were significant surpluses created by the Howard government. So in that time of crisis, the current Treasurer was able to access those. And there have been a number of points made in the chamber around the way that that funding was used. But the other issue is that consumers are not confident in the economy, so they're saving at a greater rate. They're not spending. I walk through shopping centres in my own electorate, talk to the owners, and I went into a shopping centre only 2 weeks ago with 3 people who have been in that shopping centre for some period of time, have said confidence is not there, they're not selling their product, so they're now closing their shops and they're moving on.
How much might that have to do with what we hear from Europe, the potential for a second global financial crisis, the potential for a second recession in the Eurozone?
Well, we've got to be real in this, because even though we're hearing about what's happening with the Eurodollar and the Eurozone, and certainly we're hearing about what has happened in Greece, but we're going to see what flow-on effects happen with Italy and other members of that union. We're also seeing what is happening in America. Australia is not isolated from any of those ripples. The moment one of those ripples hits us, it's magnified. But if the commodity market becomes problematic and we're not selling our commodities, and that is a pressure point that will certainly see less people being employed by the business sector or the resource sector. And that has a flow-on effect then in its consequences for the way people are not going to leave themselves vulnerable if there is a recession, or if there is a downturn in a way that leaves them exposed. They're making judgments now, and certainly I think that consumer confidence is from my point of view and from what I'm hearing, is a take on the fact that the Labor government is not managing this economy well.
Julie, how much do you think your voters are worried by what is happening in Europe?
Certainly I hear from people that they are concerned about what's happening in Europe. There's no doubt that people are concerned, but they also know that the fundamentals of the Australian economy are good. We have low unemployment, we have low levels of debt, we have record job growth. We understand that there is a patchwork economy that Ken has alluded to in terms of the mining boom and other sectors. And that is why we have our productivity agenda. That is why we're trying to roll out the NBN network. That is why we are trying to skill up people, and what we actually want to do is have a more productive economy and remove the barriers to productivity in this country.
If I could move now to a Greens bill that's being talked about by some MPs, a bill to provide easier access to workers' compensation for firefighters. Ken, do you think that's something that the major parties should support?
Look, I was in a briefing from the fireys. Certainly within HASLUC I have a close association with FISA, which is our Foreign Emergency Services, and talked to them about the range of issues they experience regularly. Now, they did a presentation based on the study out of Canada. They have identified some key issues. It has gone to our leadership team. There has been discussion, but it is still with our leadership team at the moment. Look, people have got to remember that fireys, when they front a situation, make judgments about people who might be in those buildings. They make judgments about the intensity of fire, but then they also make judgments about the hazard chemicals. And look, they do expose themselves, and the evidence shows that. But there's some debate that's occurring within our party and certainly within the coalition around some matters in respect to a proposed motion. Do
you think at this stage, do you think it should be supported?
Look, I want to know the detail first, and we will certainly discuss the detail, because with all motions you consider both its merit and then whether there are elements that you need to refine based on the thinking and the discussions around it.
Julie, there are some in your party who'd like to see this move supported. Do you think it's worth supporting?
Certainly the Labor Party supports the firefighters, and as Ken has already alluded to, they do put their lives on the line for many of us all the time, every day. They make decisions about protecting life and protecting property, and they certainly deserve our support for that. What we have done, obviously, is we've referred the bill to a Senate committee, because we are concerned about the evidence that is there, that firefighters, they start off as some of the fittest in our workplace, and then they are more susceptible to cancers at a higher rate. Clearly there is something causing this. The evidence suggests that it is their job. I think that we need to look at it very carefully. Certainly as a government, the report was only handed down a few days, and we are considering it, but clearly we're concerned, and that's why we referred it to the committee.
If I could go briefly now to something happening in your home state, Julie. The Tasmanian Greens are pushing for a motion to call on the federal government to support same-sex marriage. Most of the Labor Party state conferences have supported it. Do you think it's time for Labor federally to step up and support it?
Well, clearly the Labor Party went federally to the last election with our position. Our position is that marriage is between a man and a woman. As it's been debated widely and people are talking about it, we've all talked to our electorates about their views, and the Labor Party has a national conference towards the end of this year, which I think is the appropriate place for it to be discussed. Obviously the motion before the Tasmanian Parliament won't actually have any legal impetus, because states can't legislate for that, but Tasmania has already led the way in terms of same-sex recognition legislation that we have introduced in the state parliament in Tasmania, and certainly it's been broadly supported within the Tasmanian community.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Ken Wyatt and Julie Collins, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
And thanks for joining us for Capitol Hill today. Please join us again tomorrow.